Alright, hey guys, and welcome back to another video. Something I want to talk about with my last video. I didn't see this before, but I saw it after I uploaded it. A mistake that I made in my Weirdness Volume 1 video, and the story about Christopher Columbus and the manatees, where I say his first voyage was from August of 1492 to September of 1493. Yeah, I spelled August very, very wrong. Don't think that I don't know how to spell August, because I do. Just one of those things where I just didn't go back and just really check and make sure that everything was good before I uploaded the video. I tried to delete the video and re-upload the edit, but it wouldn't let me delete the video, so I don't know what was up with that. So I'm just going to leave it sort of as like a cautionary tale to myself to really, really make sure that grammar in your videos is good. And that's about it. I'm sorry about that if that bothered anybody. Hopefully it won't happen again. And I hope you look forward to more videos, and this video as well, Weirdness Volume 2. So like, share, subscribe, and stay weird, guys. Ta Prohum, located in Cambodia, was an urbanized area and home to the Khmer Empire. The monastery was built during the reign of Yavaman VI and was used by the Mahana Buddhists. In the 19th century, literally centuries after the disbandment of the Khmer Empire, an archaeological expedition began on the temple, now densely jungled off in the area of Angkor. Ta Prohum is a sight to see nowadays and is a big tourist attraction. Preserved in the best of the people's abilities, on the temple wall are different designs that depict life in that time period, as well as carvings of animals on the outside wall. One of the animals, though, catches the attention of every passerby, an animal that looks very much like the species of dinosaur called the Stegosaurus, the herbivore and quadruped that lived during the late Jurassic period, between 155 to 150 million years ago. But how could this be? How could an animal that died out so long ago be carved into the rock of a temple that was built by a kingdom that only existed from the 9th to the 15th century? The word Stegosaurus comes from the Greek words stegos, which means roof, and sauros, which means lizard. They were heavy built, with those signature plates that dot the back of the creatures and ends with a spiked tail. These were used as a defensive weapon against predators of the time, and by the looks of them, were incredibly effective. The carving on the wall does have a saurian-like appearance, with those protrusions on its back that look like the dorsal plates of a stegosaurus. But as the mind playing tricks on us, our perception of a stegosaurus has been diluted by pop culture and what paleontologists have depicted their fossil findings in books. So for us, this is truly what the dinosaur looked like. But could it be something more grounded in modern times? There are a few theories. One of these theories is that the backplates on the animal resemble the temple's other artistic flourishes. These flourishes are all around the temple and seem to be a distinctive art style to that culture. So maybe it's just part of the patterns that represent the entire temple. Another theory comes from the lack of a spiked tail on the animal. The tail is the staple of the Stegosaurus, but this one seems to be lacking one. There also seems to be something protruding from its head. People have described them as horns, which of course are not a staple of the Stegosaurus. If this truly was the dinosaur, why would the artist exclude the spiked tail? And furthermore, why would they include horns? Archaeologists have spent a lot of time at the site, looking hard at the mysterious animal, and have come to a semi-conclusion. Maybe it's a rhino. More specifically, a Javan rhino, which nowadays are incredibly endangered, with only 63 of them left in the world. The Khmer Empire did encounter rhinos, as they historically roamed the areas of northeastern India, Thailand, and Cambodia. So it makes sense. Maybe that lump on its head is a set of ears and not horns. But supporters of the Stegosaurus theory are adamant that it's the dinosaur and will come up with sometimes outrageous ideas to back up their theory. Like maybe this Stegosaurus has no spikes on its tail. Could a spikeless Stegosaurus exist? Again, it's a possibility, but there has been no fossil evidence of it. Just like there has been no fossil evidence that a Stegosaurus was domesticated by man, another slightly outrageous theory. The animal of Ta Prohum may always be one of those mysteries that may never be solved because everyone has a differing opinion of what it is or what they want it to be. Either way, it's a weird piece of Cambodian folklore that still has tourists pondering over it to this day. Also known as St. Vitus dance, this insane phenomenon, which sounds 100% made up, but was in fact a reality and was even extremely contagious. Medically termed choromania, it spread through Central Europe, really hitting its stride in places like Aachen in Germany, as well as Cologne, Flanders, Utrecht, and later Italy. The symptoms involved were spontaneous and continuous dancing by crowds of people. Yes, those are the symptoms. And this thing was a real threat and a huge concern to the political figures and authorities at the time. The people thought it was a curse brought on by St. Vitus, hence its name, who, according to a Christian legend, was a saint from Sicily. So in order to combat the illness and make it stop, Christians went on pilgrimages, praying at sites said to have been frequented by St. Vitus. This was in hopes that he would see the good in people of the area and lift the curse. Of course, there is much controversy around this incident and whether or not people truly danced to death. Sources at the time said around 15 people a day would die from dancing in the streets, finally collapsing in a heap of their own footloose fever. There are a few modern theories, though, that put this into a better perspective. One of them being a mass food poisoning that came from an ergo fungi which grows on grain. And if you know your history, you know that grain was used for baking bread, and that bread was a staple food of these times. Everyone ate bread. For breakfast, lunch, dinner, a second dinner, whatever you were eating, it was always served with bread. This ergomite fungi is a psychoactive drug related to the acid diamalthite, or LSD-25. Yes, LSD. Was it some sort of pre-60s psychedelic acid trip then? Where was Janis Joplin when you needed her? Another theory was mass stress-induced hysteria that occurred where a mass hysteria of mental illness broke out, and thus people started exhibiting bizarre behavior because of an underlying psychological stress due to the time's harsh living conditions. One of the first people to exhibit this phenomenon was actually a woman. In July of 1518, a woman only known as Fran Trophier began to dance repeatedly and rapidly in the streets of Strasbourg. What followed were up to 400 people within a month who were struck with the mysterious illness also dancing in the streets, most of them being women. Of course, because of the sexual politics at the time, it was viewed that this plague was caused by female mass hysteria, much like what was expected at the Salem witch trials 100 years later. Women who were under stress or women who suffered from an illness not yet diagnosed or even recognized started lashing out because they were ill, but were seen by their male counterparts as hysterical womanly behavior. Of course, it wasn't all women who suffered from this plague, and the dancing would continue, ending just as abruptly as it had started. Over the course of history, there have been many peace treaties and everyone has followed them. That was sarcasm, of course, no one has ever followed them. One of these so-called treaties was called Infinite Peace, or Pax Britanniae, signed by the Byzantine Empire and the Persians in 532, after the Battle of Kallinikos, which was a huge loss for both sides. Under the treaty, the Byzantines paid 11,000 pounds in gold and ceded their city of Dares. A few years pass, and the new Persian Shah, Khusro I, who, like most rulers of his time, was a tyrant and a bully, and who you will soon find out has a pretty dark sense of humor, broke the treaty in 540 after being persuaded by the Ostrogoths, whose goals were to distract the Byzantine Empire's campaign in Italy, and thus got what they wanted. Khusro would go on to invade the Byzantine with 30,000 troops, capturing the cities of Sura, Beora, and Antioch, which had suffered an earthquake causing much of the wall structure to have collapsed, and was under reconstruction from Justinian, who was going to name it Theopolis. Justinian and his others refused to surrender, so Khusro and his men raided, looted, and burned the city to the ground. Afterwards, Khusro would go on to rename the city. This is where his dark sense of humor would come in, as he had a very particular name for the newly conquered city. He would go on to name it Way Antioch Khusro, which roughly translates to better than Antioch by Khusro. So to say the Sasanian emperor didn't have an ego is an understatement. And to add salt to the wound, all the remaining Antioch residents had to refer to it as the New Antioch. This would be the downfall of the city, reduced to a small village by 1517 after being taken over by the Ottoman Turks, remaining part of the empire until World War I, coming under French rule, who would give it back to the Turks in 1939, finally giving the city a place it deserved since Khusro's overthrow.